The jungle did not welcome them. It watched them. The survey shuttle came down through green-brown clouds and landed in a clearing that was just barely wide enough. The moment the engines cut, the noise of JS-7 rushed in through the hull sensors. A wall of sound, layered and wet and alive. Clicks, deep calls, the crack of something large moving through trees that were 40 meters tall. Dr. Nora Hale was the first one to pull up the external feed. She sat in the back row of the shuttle and looked at the screen without blinking. The clearing around them was ringed by dense growth. The canopy overhead was so thick it turned the afternoon light into something dim and green. The ground was soft, dark, covered in low plants that moved even when there was no wind. Something was making them move. Brick stood at the front of the shuttle and addressed the crew the way he always did. Straight, clipped, no room for questions that were not already scheduled. He was tall, gray-scaled, with yellow eyes that moved independently of each other. He had led 14 survey missions for the Galactic Accord. He spoke like that number meant something. GS-7 protocol is passive observation only. Sensor arrays deploy within 1 hour of landing. No crew member moves past the perimeter markers without clearance from me. Fauna on this world is rated extreme class. We do not engage. We do not provoke. We document and we leave. Any questions? No one asked anything. There were 6 of them. Bricks and 3 Accord scientists. Sova, a small feathered Faluran who clutched her data tablet like it could protect her, and 2 others who moved with the careful precision of people who had read every warning file twice. Then the 2 humans, Nora and Corporal Deo Osei, who sat with his arms loose across his knees and looked at the feed with a quiet expression that was not quite a smile. Big trees, Deo said. Big everything, Nora answered. They deployed the perimeter in 40 minutes. For sensor posts, a deterrent ring, a weather canopy. By the time camp was functional, the light had shifted and the jungle sounds had changed their rhythm. Whatever lived here was adjusting to the new shape in its territory. Bricks sent 2 scientists to the eastern ridge for passive sensor runs. Nora filed her equipment report and stood at the edge of the perimeter shield, watching the tree lean. Sova appeared beside her, not because she wanted to be near the edge, but because she had noticed Nora standing there and felt less afraid when someone else was present. The readings from the western side are unusual, Sova said quietly. Large heat signatures, 3 of them, moving parallel to camp. They have been since we landed, Nora said. Sova looked at her. You noticed? The plant on the west side had been bending in a direction that doesn't match the wind. Nora did not take her eyes off the tree lean. Something is walking there. Something heavy. Sova stepped back 1 small step without seeming to notice she had done it. The tree lean moved. Not the whole of it. One section, 40 meters out, shifted. Branches parted without breaking. And then it was there. It stood at the edge of the shadow and did not step further. It was large, 3 meters at the shoulder, 6-limbed, with scales that caught the low light and gave back a color like dried rust. Its head was broad and flat, jaw heavy. Its eyes were copper-colored and did not move. They were looking directly at the camp. Behind Nora, Sova made a sound that was not a word and moved back fast. The 2 other scientists scrambled for the inner ring. Bricks came out of the command tent and saw it and went still. Perimeter to maximum, he said very calmly. The hum of the deterrent ring went up a register. The creature did not move. Nora did not move either. She stayed where she was at the edge of the shield, and she did the one thing that no one else was doing. She looked at it the way it was looking at her. Not with fear, not with a weapon in her hand. She kept her body low and loose, her gaze not quite direct, and she stayed completely still. 30 seconds. A minute. 2. The creature's head tilted. Slow, almost like a question. Then it stepped back into the shadow, and it was gone. The branches settled. The plant stopped moving. The jungle went back to its deep, wet sounds as if nothing had happened at all. Bricks came to stand beside Nora. His voice was controlled, but there was something behind it. You should have moved back with the others. If I had moved back, Nora said, it would have read that as prey behavior. Bricks stared at the now empty tree lean. You cannot know that. No, Nora agreed. But it walked away, so she went back inside to write her field notes. Bricks stayed at the edge for a long time, looking at the place where it had stood. That night, when the camp had gone quiet and the bioluminescent moss on the jungle floor made the world glow in pale blue and green, Sova checked the perimeter sensors from inside the command tent. The creature had circled their camp. 3 full rotations. Close enough that its weight registered on the ground sensors. Far enough that it had never tripped the deterrent ring. It had not come closer. It had not left. Sova looked at that data for a long time. Then she looked toward the tent where Nora was sleeping, and she did not know what to think about either of them. The relay message came in the morning, while the mist was still low over the clearing and the jungle smelled like wet earth and something sweet. Brix read it twice. Then he set his tablet down on the camp table and pressed both hands flat against the surface and breathed through his nose. The message was exactly what he had expected it to be. He had filed the sighting report at first light. Command had responded within the hour. Their instructions were clear. Maintain perimeter power at maximum, reduce crew exposure to the exterior, and do not, under any condition, attempt engagement with the observed fauna. He showed the message to Nora. She read it once, handed it back, poured herself a cup of water from the camp filter, and looked out at the tree line through the open tent panel. They wrote that from a ship in orbit, she said. They wrote it from a ship in orbit, Brix confirmed, because that is where command makes decisions, and those decisions apply to this crew. Nora turned the cup slowly in her hands. The creature didn't charge us last night. It circled camp and slept 40 meters out. That's not predatory behavior toward target. That's proximity testing. It's curious. It is dangerous. Those aren't the same thing. Brix picked up his tablet again. I'm logging a formal standing order. No crew member passes the perimeter without my clearance. That includes you, Dr. Hale. He said it without heat, which made it worse. It was not a warning. It was a wall. Nora said nothing. She finished her water and went to check her sensor array. Deo found her an hour later at the equipment station on the camp's west side, running a calibration on her bioacoustic recorder. He did not ask what she was thinking. He just sat down on the equipment case across from her and started cleaning his field kit, slow and methodical, the way he always did when he was waiting for a conversation to start on its own. My uncle kept goats, he said after a while. Back home, just outside Accra. People always said goats were stubborn, stupid, hard to manage. He turned a tool in his hands. My uncle never had that problem. I asked him once how he did it. He said, you have to let them know you're not a threat before you ask anything of them. Most people skip that part. Nora looked up from her recorder. Brix filed a standing order. I know. I'm going out this afternoon. Deo nodded, like she had said something about the weather. I'll come with you. She looked at him. You don't have to. I know that too. He snapped his kit shut and stood up. Tell me when. Brix was in the data tent reviewing the Eastern Ridge scans when Nora crossed the perimeter. She did not ask for clearance. She took her field kit, her recorder, and nothing else. No weapon. She walked 25 meters past the deterrent ring, found a flat piece of open ground, and sat down. The jungle was loud around her and also, in a way that mattered, completely still. Deo came out 10 minutes later and sat down 10 feet to her left. He had his hands on his knees. He looked at the tree line without tension, the way a person looks at a view they find interesting rather than threatening. They waited. 11 minutes. Then the western section of the tree line moved, and the creature stepped out into the open. It was bigger in the full light of day than it had seemed at dusk. The rust-colored scales had deeper tones in them, brown, amber, a dark stripe along the ridge of its spine. It moved on 4 of its 6 limbs while the other 2 folded against its chest. It stopped at the tree line's edge and watched them. Nora kept her gaze slightly to the side of it. Not away. She wasn't pretending it wasn't there, just not directly on its eyes. She let her shoulders drop. She put her hands on the ground in front of her, palms down, open. The creature's head moved. Left, right? Slow. Deo didn't move at all. He was, Nora thought, extraordinarily good at simply existing without broadcasting anything. No tension in his body. No readiness. He was just a shape in the grass, the same as a rock was a shape or a root. 40 minutes passed. The creature came no closer and retreated no farther. It stood and watched and occasionally shifted its weight. Once it turned its head and looked into the jungle behind it, and then looked back at them, as if checking whether anything else had noticed this arrangement. Then it turned and walked back into the trees. Unhurried, without looking back, Nora exhaled slowly. Deo said, "It'll come back sooner tomorrow." "Yes," she said. When they returned to camp, Brix was waiting. His expression was the flat, careful kind that meant he had decided ahead of time to stay controlled. "I will be filing a formal protocol violation," he said. "I know," Nora said. "File it." She went inside. Deo followed without a word. That night, alone in the data tent, Brix pulled up the biometric feed from Nora's field recorder. Heart rate, respiration, cortisol markers through the wrist sensor. He sat with the data for a long time. Her heart rate during the 40-minute encounter had not risen above 62 beats per minute. She had been calmer, sitting 25 meters from an extreme-class predator than Brix had been reading the command message at breakfast. He did not understand it. He was beginning to think that was the problem. He closed the file, opened the violation report, stared at it. He did not file it yet. Rain came on the third day, a slow, gray drizzle that made the jungle quieter and turned the clearing soil dark. The kind of rain that pressed everything closer to the ground and made the world feel smaller and more honest. Nora was already outside before the others at breakfast. She sat in the same spot as the day before, which was already beginning to look like a spot. The grass slightly flattened, the ground around it undisturbed in a deliberate way. She had her recorder running on low power. She was not doing anything else, just being present in the rain. Deo came out without being asked. He sat in the same position too, 10 feet to her left, and pulled his jacket collar up and said nothing. The creature arrived in 9 minutes. Nora had not told Deo she thought it would come faster. She hadn't needed to. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it was there, stepping out of the tree line at the same western gap it had used before, moving on 4 legs with its upper 2 folded, its copper eyes already on the 2 humans sitting in the wet grass. It was closer today, perhaps 5 meters closer than yesterday. Nora let that go without reaction. For the first 20 minutes, it was the same as before, the creature standing, watching, shifting weight, looking sideways into the jungle. Then it did something different. It lowered its head until its jaw was near the ground, and it exhaled. Long and slow. A sound came with it, deep, almost below what human ears picked up cleanly, a vibration more than a tone. Nora felt it in her chest before she heard it with her ears. She waited 3 seconds. Then she let out her own breath, long and slow, and made a sound at the back of her throat, lower than her normal voice. Steady. The creature's head came up, its eyes fixed on her. She did not look away. This time, she let the eye contact happen, held it, not challenging, not submissive, just present, even, like 2 things that occupied the same space and had decided, for now, to acknowledge that fact. Deo, to her left, made a quiet sound, not copying what Nora had done, his own thing, like a slow exhale with shape to it. The sound a person makes when they're settling in somewhere they intend to stay. The creature looked at him for a moment, then back at Nora. Its weight shifted forward. 1 step, then another. It stopped 8 meters out. Nora's recorder caught all of it. The ambient data, the creature's sounds, the timing of every movement. But none of that was what was happening, really. What was happening was much simpler and much older than data. 2 kinds of living things were sitting in the rain and deciding, slowly and without words, what the other one was. Neither of them was deciding dangerous. Behind them, at the edge of the perimeter shield, Sova stood under the weather canopy overhang with a data tablet she had stopped looking at 10 minutes ago. She had come out to get a moisture reading from the exterior sensor. She had stayed because she could not make herself leave. She watched Nora's back, the creature's face, the rain coming down between them. She had grown up on a world where the biggest animals were small, where nothing wild would look at you and choose to stay. She had no framework for what she was seeing. The Accord taught that extreme-class fauna responded to 1 set of inputs: volume, movement, perceived threat. You were either a threat or prey. There was no third option, except there was. It was right in front of her, getting rained on. Inside, Brick sat at the data station reviewing the bioacoustic file for the previous day. He had been at it for 2 hours. He isolated the sound frequencies the creature used, categorized them, mapped them against known animal communication databases. The sounds were not random. The intervals were not random. The variations in tone, 6 distinct tonal shifts in 40 minutes, corresponded to what researchers called a social assessment sequence. The kind of exchange that meant, I'm deciding what you are to me. He sat with that conclusion for a while. Then Nora came back inside, wet from the rain, and he heard her moving toward the equipment station. He almost said nothing. He almost let her walk past. The acoustic patterns from yesterday, he said. I need to show you something. She stopped in the doorway, looked at him. The tonal sequences, he said, turning the screen toward her. They are not random. There is structure. Nora came and looked at the screen. She looked for a long time. I know, she said. I could feel it when it was happening. The rhythm of it. Brix looked at her. You responded to it. This morning, your recorder picked it up. You matched the structure. I tried to. He turned back to the screen. His voice was careful, like he was handling something that might break. Did it respond differently after you did that? It came 5 meters closer, Nora said. And it stayed? Brix was quiet for a moment. Then, how long before you think it will allow direct proximity? It was the first question he had asked that was not about protocol. Nora thought about it. A day. Maybe 2. He nodded once, slowly, and turned back to the data. He did not say anything else. But he did not close the file either. He kept working. Outside, the rain kept falling. The creature had gone back to the tree line, but it had not gone far. Sova could still see the copper gleam of its eyes in the shadows, watching the camp the way it always did. Waiting. The alarm went off at midday, when the sky above JS-7 had turned the color of old copper and the heat sat heavy on the clearing like a held breath. It was not the perimeter alarm. It was the inner ring. Something had already come through the outer sensor line before it triggered, fast, low to the ground, cutting through the western gap in a way that suggested it knew the outer ring's frequency. It was inside the camp boundary before anyone had time to respond properly. It was young. That was the first thing Nora noticed when she came out of the equipment tent and saw it. Smaller than the creature she had been sitting with for 2 days. Leaner. The scales were brighter, less weathered, with no stripe on the spine yet. Its movements were all sharp angles, too fast, no patience, no read of the space around it. The way very young things move when they're all energy and no experience. It had come in from the western side, and now it stood in the middle of the camp between the command tent and the equipment station, and it was breathing hard and fast, and its head was swinging left and right, taking in shapes and movement. The 2 other Accord scientists backed against the far tent wall. Sova froze near the canopy post, her tablet pressed against her chest. Brix came out with his rifle. He did not fire. He raised it and stepped forward and fired a sharp burst of sound. The deterrent setting, not a charge. 3 fast pulses that cracked through the clearing like a hand slamming a table. The young creature screamed, high and ragged, and it turned toward Brix and charged. It covered half the distance in under a second. Nora had no time to think. She stepped sideways, not toward the creature and not away from it, and she made the sound, the low, long exhale tone she had been practicing for 2 days. Not loud, not sharp, the opposite of Brix's deterrent burst. She made it and held it and dropped her weight low to the ground. The creature skidded. Its rear legs went wide. It stopped 3 meters from Brix, and its head swung toward the sound. From the western tree line came a sound that hit them all like a wall. Deep, below hearing, felt in the lungs and the floor of the jaw. The kind of sound that said, without any possible misunderstanding, stop. The large creature came out of the jungle at a run. It crossed the clearing in seconds, a streak of rust-colored scale and controlled mass, and it placed itself between the young creature and the humans. Not between the humans and the young creature. That distinction mattered. It was not protecting the creature from them. It was protecting them from the creature. It turned its body sideways, used its full size as a wall, and drove the young one back with a low rumble that did not stop. The young creature went. It thrashed and pushed back twice, testing, and both times a large one held. It turned and sprinted back through the western gap and was gone. Silence. The large creature stood in the middle of the clearing, chest moving with heavy breath, and it looked at the humans. One by one. Brix, still holding the rifle. Sova against the post. Nora, crouched, her hand still extended slightly from the sound she had made. It looked at Nora longest. Then it turned and walked back toward the tree line, unhurried, and settled at the edge of the shadow the way it always did. Sova's voice came out of her before she seemed to decide to speak. It protected us. No one answered right away. Brix lowered the rifle. He stood in the middle of the camp and looked at the place where the creature had stood, and he was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that is not peace, but thinking hard, reluctant thinking that someone does when the shape of what they believed is cracked and they're checking every piece of it. He set the rifle down against the equipment case, and he went back inside without a word. That evening, Deo cooked from the camp rations, which he did whenever things were heavy because doing something with his hands helped him think. Sova sat near the camp table and did not eat much. The two other scientists talked quietly between themselves. Nora wrote in her field notes. Later, Brix came to the table and sat down. He looked at his food. Then he looked at Nora. "How did you know it would come?" he said. "The large one." "I didn't," she said. "I just knew that making a familiar sound was better than nothing." He was quiet. Then, "You were not afraid." Nora thought about that. "I was. But I've learned that doing something careful is better than doing nothing scared." Brix picked up his fork. "Put it down again." "I have been on 14 survey missions," he said. "I have never seen anything like what happened today." "I know." He looked at her. "I do not know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything with it tonight," she said. He ate his food. He did not say anything else. But later that night, he opened his violation report from 2 days ago, the one he had never filed, and he read it. Then he deleted the whole thing and wrote a new entry, 3 lines long, under the heading Field Observation. Unanticipated social behavior. Positive outcome. He filed that one. The message from the relay ship came in at dusk, when the sky over GS-7 had gone deep orange and the bioluminescent moss was just beginning to wake along the tree roots. It was marked urgent. Brix read it standing at the data station, and by the time he finished, the orange outside had started to look less like sunset and more like a warning that an Accord military assessment team was inbound. ETA 18 hours.GS-7 had been flagged by the Resource Division 3 weeks ago, before the survey crew had even landed. The assessment team's job was standard: catalog terrain, evaluate extraction viability, and conduct fauna threat response evaluation. That last part meant live-fire deterrent testing on any creature rated extreme class. Brix set the tablet down carefully. He thought about what he had watched happen in this clearing over the past 4 days. Then he went to find Nora. She was outside. She was always outside now, in the late afternoon, sitting in the grass with Deo. The creature was there too, closer than it had ever been. 6 meters, near enough that Nora could have reached it in 3 steps. It was lying down, weight settled on its lower 4 limbs, the upper 2 folded against its chest. Its eyes were half closed in the way that, Nora had noted, meant comfortable rather than tired. Brix stood at the perimeter edge and watched for a moment. Then he walked out and sat down on Nora's other side, which surprised her enough that she turned to look at him. He told her about the message. The half-closed eyes on the creature's face opened fully. Not because anything had changed in the clearing, because Nora's breathing had changed, and it noticed. 18 hours, she said. Yes. We need to file a reclassification request before they land. She was already thinking through it. Cognitive complexity data, the acoustic analysis, the social behavior records from the incident yesterday. If we can get a Tier 3 protected designation flag before the assessment team runs their protocol, they can't do the deterrent testing without a counter review. The data package would need to come from the full crew, Brix said. A single researcher's field notes won't hold up. It needs to be a formal joint submission. Nora looked at him. He looked back. I will compile the acoustic analysis, he said. I have been building it for 2 days. It is already half a formal report. She nodded once. That was all. They worked for 2 hours in the command tent, side by side, building the package. Nora's behavioral logs, time-stamped and annotated. Brix's acoustic data, cross-referenced with the Accord's own cognitive complexity frameworks. The biometric feeds from every exterior session. The incident record from the previous day, rewritten by Brix in formal language that was precise and honest and left nothing out. Sova came in halfway through and sat down without being invited. She put her tablet on the table. "I have been watching a second creature," she said, "on the western ridge. For 3 days. I have notes." She set the tablet so they could see the screen. "I did not know if they were worth anything." Brix looked at her data. It was careful work. Organized. Detailed in the way that only happens when someone has been paying close attention and did not want to admit how close. "They are worth something," he said. "Add them." The submission went up to the relay ship at the 3-hour mark. Status: pending review. No response yet. Outside, the clearing had gone full dark. The moss glowed. The jungle sang its nighttime sounds. All 6 crew members were outside. That IT had happened without anyone suggesting it. One by one, they had drifted out after the submission was filed. They sat in a rough arc near the perimeter edge. The creature was there. Rust-colored scales catching the moss light in deep amber. It lay settled, the upper limbs folded. 10 feet beyond it, half visible at the tree line, the second creature sat on its haunches and observed the group with the careful patience of something that had not decided yet, but was leaning toward yes. Sova sat 3 feet closer to the perimeter edge than she ever had before. Deo looked at the large creature for a while. The way the light moved across the scales when it breathed. The rust tones in the amber. He said the name quietly, the way you say something the first time to see how it sounds. Rusht. No one said anything for a moment. Then Nora said Rust the same way. Then Sova. Then the 2 other scientists, one after the other, like something being agreed on without a vote. Brick said nothing. But he did not say it wasn't right either. The creature's head turned at the sound. Copper eyes moved across the group. It made a low sound, not the assessment tone, not the warning from the day before. Something shorter, quieter, like an answer to a question it had been waiting for someone to ask. Nora checked the relay feed on her wrist unit. The reclassification request was still marked pending. The assessment team was 16 hours out. She looked at rust in the moss light and hoped 16 hours was enough. Deo, beside her, was looking up through a gap in the canopy where a handful of stars were visible. "It's going to be fine," he said. The way her uncle probably talked to goats, she almost believed him. The assessment shuttle broke through the cloud layer 2 hours early. Nora was outside when it came down. She heard the engine before she saw it, a low drone cutting through the morning jungle calls. The shuttle was gray and wide, built for function, and it landed on the far end of the clearing with the kind of authority that assumed the clearing existed for it. Rust was at the tree line. He had been there since dawn. Nora had not moved from her usual spot in the grass. She sat with her hands on her knees and watched the shuttle settle and waited. Commander Voss came down the ramp first. He was broad-shouldered, dark-scaled, a Tauren built like someone who had spent a long career making quick decisions in bad situations. He had 4 team members behind him in assessment gear. They came down the ramp and fanned out the way trained people do, checking angles, noting distances, reading the terrain. Then Voss saw Nora. He stopped. She was sitting in the open grass, 20 meters from the shuttle, no weapon, no protective gear, field jacket damp from the morning air. And 10 meters behind her, at the edge of the tree line, an extreme-class fauna specimen the size of a transport vehicle was lying down watching the new arrivals with copper eyes. Voss's hand moved toward his side. "He won't charge," Nora said, without turning around. "Not unless you raise a weapon. If you raise a weapon, I can't promise anything, so I'd rather you didn't." Voss stared at her, then at Rust, then back at her. "What," he said, "is happening here? A survey mission." Nora stood up slowly, turned to face him. "We've been here 5 days. That creature has been with us for 4 of them. My name is Dr. Nora Hale, and I'd like to introduce you to someone." Brix came out of the command tent and walked across the clearing toward Voss with a data drive in his hand. He had been awake since before the reclassification status changed. It had come through 2 hours ago, flagged for counter review, which meant the assessment team could not run deterrent protocol without a formal dispute process first. The window was narrow, but it was there. The full crew debrief took 90 minutes. Voss sat at the camp table with his team, and he listened. Brix presented the acoustic analysis with precision, walking through each data point without drama. Sova gave her behavioral report on the second creature. 3 days of solo observation, presented clearly and without apology. The rest of the crew added their accounts. Voss's team asked hard questions. Brix answered each one directly. When there were uncertainties, he said so. When the data was solid, he said that to the end. Voss was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up and walked to the perimeter edge. He stood there and he looked at Rust, who was in his usual position at the tree line and was looking back with the steady patience he had shown from the first night. Voss studied him for a while. Rust did not move, did not posture, did not make a sound. He simply existed in the space the same way he always did, as if the question of whether he was dangerous had been settled long ago by something other than size. Tier 3 protected status, Voss said finally, pending full cognitive assessment. I'll flag both specimens. He turned back to the camp. I'll need the complete data package uploaded to the relay before I leave. It's already queued, Brix said. Voss looked at him, then at Nora, then back at the creature one more time, with the expression of someone recalculating something they thought they had understood. His team began prepping the shuttle for departure. Voss stood apart and watched the crew move around camp in their regular rhythms, easy and unhurried, with Rust at the tree line like he had always been part of the arrangement. Before he went up the ramp, he stopped beside Nora. I have done 31 assessment missions, he said. I have never walked into a site like this. We didn't plan it, Nora said. It just kept being the right thing to do. Voss looked at her. Your people are not afraid of anything, are you? Nora thought about that. About the first night in the shuttle, watching the plants move. About sitting in the rain with her heart going faster than her biometrics showed. About the moment the young creature had charged, and the only thing she'd had was a sound and a choice. We're afraid of plenty, she said. We just decided a long time ago that fear is a place to start, not a place to stop. The shuttle lifted an hour later. The crew stood in the clearing and watched it go. When the sound of the engine faded, the jungle came back. The clicks and calls and deep, slow rhythms of a world that had been here long before any of them and would be here long after. Rust walked out from the tree line and settled into the grass. Sova sat down near him, closer than she ever had, and opened her field notes and began to write. That evening, in his report to the Accord relay, Voss wrote his observation notes the way he always did. Precise, unemotional, factual. At the end, under additional notes, he added 2 sentences that he wrote. Humans do not manage danger. They make it into something else entirely. The Accord should take note that he filed the report and closed his terminal and sat in the quiet of his shuttle for a long time, thinking about Copper Eyes.